Imagine having the most aesthetic physique in history, a life full of luxury and the admiration of people. However, few knew that what looked so good on the outside was actually on the inside being debated between life and death. Flex Wheeler's life has been a life marked by depression, recognizing that he was never happy with his physique, and the price of living that life was depression, very serious kidney problems, and a pain that Flex described as insufferable. So much so that the day he had to undergo an amputation of his leg, the man who had competed with Ronnie Coleman in the size of his legs said he found peace in an operation that completely changed his life. How would you face life if the body that defined you becomes the biggest reminder of what you lost? Not everyone knows that Flex Wheeler was destined to be the greatest bodybuilder in history. However, life had another destiny for Flex. This documentary doesn't just chronicle a life of ups and downs. Today, we will rather discover how to deal with the existential void that remains when what defines us most disappears. Were all of Flex's sacrifices really worth it? Well, stick around to find out. Flex Wheeler tells us that he suffered multiple abuses as a child. He says that self-destructive thoughts haunted his mind. The abuse he suffered from his family caused him to isolate himself with sports. From the flexibility he acquired through martial arts came his nickname Flex Wheeler. And the truth is that he had an undeniable talent for the sport, as can be seen in these videos of his childhood. These are images of his past as a karateka, and it is that from a young age you could see a unique genetics for such a young and natural physique. What is striking about Flex Wheeler's career is that he turned professional, and the same year he did it, he managed to beat Mike Materasso. But that same year, he also managed to win the Arnold Classic, the most prestigious competition after the Olympia. This undoubtedly consolidated him as the bodybuilder with the greatest projection of all. The year of the war arrives, and we see a lineup with Dorian Yates, Kevin LeBron, and Sean Ray, and among all of them, Flex Wheeler with a physique that showed a privileged structure. The man to beat here was Dorian Yates, undoubtedly the bodybuilder with the best condition, but with a criticized belly that was precisely Flex Wheeler's strong point. Now the decision was up to the judges, but this was one of those Olympics where the future of bodybuilding would be debated. Would aesthetics win or the size and condition that Dorian Yates imposed?
Finally, Dorian Yates win this Olympia battle. But for the next year, all the eyes was put in Flex Wheeler physique.
He had just turned pro, and already there was a physique and a proposition about him that the rest didn't have. His thin waist, along with all the size he had managed to put together, put him in the polls as the leading candidate to be the face of bodybuilding in the following years. At the media level, his image was beginning to be the most remarkable. He began to show a life of luxury, even rubbing shoulders with rappers of the time like Dr. Dre. And although as a child he had been a shy boy, now he fearlessly showed a life of luxury accompanied by his wife and with all the riches of the bodybuilders of that time. Huge houses perfectly furnished, the latest model cars of that time in the 90s, and in short, a life that looked perfect, or that's what it was at least in the eyes of the people. The Olympia of 1994 arrived, and we would say that the script could be pre-established. The logical thing was for Dorian to face Flex Wheeler again, but in this lineup we don't see Flex anywhere, and this could be the golden opportunity for Flex as Dorian Yates came in a version that many will remember because of his injured arm. However, Flex Wheeler was the last thing he should be thinking about that year at Mr. Olympia as he was debating life and death. These you see here are images of what the Mercedes Flex Wheeler was driving on the August night of 1994 looked like. When he was returning from a meeting with rapper Dr. Dre, this was the complex situation in which Flex Wheeler was left, who that year planned to be competing in the Mr. Olympia being the main favorite. Flex tells us how he broke his neck in two different parts. As soon as he came out of surgery, he would stare at the ceiling thinking that it was all over, that he had lost everything. He was a bodybuilder. He lived off his image. Now without this, his sponsorships and all his agreements would be broken. All his cars, what financed his way of life he had lost. And to top it all off, he says that his worst mistake was to attend the Olympia in 1994 and watch from the audience how all his rivals competed against each other while he was sitting there for something unrelated to the sport. However, when we talk about Flex Wheeler's story being one in a million, it's because the following year in 1995 he was invited to the Ironman Pro and he showed up with this physique. The doctors had told him that of course bodybuilding was more than discarded, that he should not compete or prepare because his physique could not withstand such a level of demand. It is difficult to know how much impact this would have on his health problems later in his much later life, but the truth is that Flex ignored the doctor's instructions, continued with his career as a bodybuilder, and only a year later he was winning that professional championship and preparing for a Mr. Olympia that faced him with this attitude.
Black? Is he black?
Yeah.
In 1975, the Mr. Olympia would be contested between Kevin LeBron again and Sean Ray. Flex Wheeler had to settle for an 8th place finish and a 2nd place finish at the Arnold Classic that same year. In Flex's own words, he had felt like the rest had had a year to keep stepping on the gas when he had been struggling to regain the physique he once had. Even so, the work to return gave us flashes of that imposing physique again in 1993, and by the Olympia in 1996, he had regained some of his potential.
I came in approximately 6 pounds heavier, and I think almost equal to same condition, especially with the situation that's going on with us. So I'm really happy with that, and because of it, so I'm really happy, man. I'm just elated.
En esta Olimpia del 1996, Flex quedaría en un 5º lugar.
He would once again crown Dorian Yates against Sean Ray. One of the highlights of the year was this early battle with Ronnie Coleman. Ronnie had not yet won a Mr. Olympia, and the result of that championship went to Flex Wheeler. In 1997 now, yes, Flex did seem to have it all to win. He would win the Arnold of that year, being for Schwarzenegger himself his favorite bodybuilder as he came to mention. Interestingly enough, he would once again beat Ronnie Coleman. He also won at the Sombati, and that year it seemed that he had a clear path to this time, yes, win a long-awaited Mr. Olympia, and to be able to be catalogued as the best physique on the planet. Against all odds, Flex shows up at a press conference, and with one arm slashed, he says that he will not be able to compete in the Olympia because he has been the victim of a violent attack. In his own words, some violent people dressed as ninjas had injured him with nunchucks. I know this sounds like a joke, but believe me, this is Flex Wheeler's version. That's when he says that because he knows martial arts, he was able to defend himself from the attack. This evidently didn't sound believable to the fans. They soon chalked his answers up to him because it sounded more like a flight forward. Some speculated that he didn't want to run because he hadn't achieved the status. Here, I have to say that Flex had just won the Arnold of that year, 1997. How could he, being one of the favorites and coming in the ascendant line, not want to run? Well, this is where years later the theories begin to emerge that most fit with certain episodes throughout Flex's career. Later audios would make us realize that Flex was in a very delicate financial situation. You will remember that after the accident he saw all his contracts with the brands compromised.
1997 I started having this problem at that time, colitis. So now I have a problem with eating. I eat for a living. Competing and everything like that. So I couldn't tell that. How am I going to go out and tell that? Because I was scared that I was going to lose my home and my contract again. So, I made a bad decision in coming up with a lie because twice already the truth wasn't good enough. And that lie actually enabled me, unfortunately, to keep my contract and get myself back into the point where I can come back in 98.
He literally lived off his image. As a bodybuilder, he was totally aware that if a health problem lurked within him, he would lose his livelihood. Years later, it was learned that indeed Flex Wheeler did have health problems throughout his competitive career. However, this was seen as merely temporary. As implausible as it sounded, a stroke just before the Olympia allowed Flex Wheeler to continue his career. Knowing that he was going to be present at the next year's Olympia, the brands of course didn't want to miss out on being with him. He was the Sultan of Symmetry, the most aesthetically pleasing physique of of all. These are images of the Arnold Classic from the Olympia era. And it is paradoxical and unbelievable how a physique can look so good on the outside, winning championships, making bodybuilding history, but in reality some to already see all the problems he was actually having on the inside. But Flex Wheeler wins the Arnold Classic at the time of the Olympia, and with this he now claims to be the clear favorite to be Mr. Olympia. And now there was a clear path. The glorious years of Dorian Yates were over and all the spotlight was on him. But just when it seemed to be Flex's year, an unexpected figure burst in. Ronnie Coleman, who had not been in the top positions to date, makes in 1 year one of the most incredible mutations in bodybuilding history. That Olympia of
One of these men goes home with a second place $50,000 check. The other man goes home with the 10th Mr. Olympia contest title and a $110,000 check. In second place, Flex Wheeler.
So it was that Flex Wheeler was another year away from being Mr. Clean. This time it was Ronnie Coleman who came in without being a clean sweep, and he took it in what appeared to be Flex Wheeler's Olympia. Thus he received the award, took the defeat, and was left with this face to see that still the Sultan of Symmetry, the most blessed genetics of bodybuilding, could not get a Mr. Olympia. But it is that along the way he had to meet a beast, with what few could know was going to be a true legend in the history of bodybuilding, Ronnie Coleman. But now we are in the year of revolution and Flex comes with a hunger for revenge. He wants to bring one of his most remarkable physiques to date. It was known in advance that the battle was going to be again with Ronnie Coleman, who now already shocked the world with his workout so characteristic in the Metro Flex. Undoubtedly, the battle was on. The time came, and in this condition both athletes presented themselves. The companion will be none other than Chris Cormier. We are living in the golden age of bodybuilding, physiques that many of you will agree we have not seen since. It seemed impossible to combine such size, the condition that Ronnie Coleman brought, and at the same time the symmetry and aesthetics of Flex Wheeler, with a hyper-dense back, a tiny waist. All this accompanied at the same time by a condition that is not so easy to see in today's times. In the individual routines, what we are presented with from Flex Wheeler is also one of his best physiques to date. These images of the 99 can now be seen in better quality. But now it was time to check what we had been looking for a year ago. Would Flex get his revenge, or would he be forced to see if he would be beaten by another bodybuilder for the third time in a row?
The certificates, the 2 silver medals will be presented to Flex Wheeler.
Flex Wheeler lost again, but this year his reaction would be different. Frustration would get the better of him, and he would be reluctant to the judge's decision, saying that he was the real winner of that competition, and with this long face, he could not agree with what he had just been given. And mind you, he did congratulate Ronnie Coleman. However, he said goodbye saying that he was number 1. However, the number 1 by the judges that night had not been Flex, it had been Ronnie Coleman, who won his second Mr. Olympia out of 8. We are still in the year 99, and few could have known that this would be one of the last images they would see of this unique trident of bodybuilding facing each other at the highest level. At the Grand Prix of England, Flex defeats Kevin LeBron, but the shadow of Ronnie Coleman haunts him. Once again, Ronnie Coleman beats Flex, and few were aware that at the time that marble-carved physique was actually experiencing severe health problems. Flex was still winning championships, including the Arnold Classic, a competition he was always particularly good at, as he would end up winning 4 and being highly praised by Arnold. However, from the year 2000 onwards, we see the last images of Flex at the highest level. It would be real problems that would take him out of the game. Despite seeing himself with that physique, he comments that the situation worsened to the point that his life was at risk. If he didn't get a kidney donor limb, he could die. Finally, it was his mother who volunteered to be his donor. This surgery was the best thing for him and at the same time the worst thing. It saved him, but it made him suffer a series of pains that he would call unbearable. And to this we must add a second effect that not many people talk about, but that ends up being common among bodybuilders. We must add the depression and mental problems that he himself acknowledged having had. In his own words, after the disease, he went from looking like a demigod, from posing shirtless in this way and going out on the street with this confidence, to being prostrate in a chair, unrecognizable. And all this happened in the course of barely a year. You could clearly see the mark of that surgery, and that Flex, far from taking it as a second chance, admitted to being very affected. Mamali.
Extremely hard, knowing that I looked a certain way just a year ago. Then I would say, geez, I'm reduced to just a mere mortal. When I was like demigod, here I am, just a mere mortal. When you walk, you don't feel a certain way because of the muscle mass that you used to carry. You see the atrophy all over your body.
His words sounded like his past as a bodybuilder had caused him a dissonance in what he once was and what he now was. But Flex Wheeler was not only affected by the passage of time, because this is something that happens to all of us, no matter how hard we try to pretend it isn't so. Time is cruel to everyone. He, on the other hand, was also affected by more than 40 surgeries he had to undergo. To the kidney problems that Flex had, we must add multiple vascular problems that would make him suffer, in his own words, an almost unbearable pain in the following years. These pains that he suffered would make him be highly medicated. But still, remember that thing we talked about, how hard it was for him to lose that condition that he was known for? Maybe that's why, even at the age of 50 and with all the problems he was suffering from, he looked the way he did. No doubt with a physique out of the average, now tattooed and of course criticized by many for making use of what many felt were localized oils in certain muscles. Be that as it may, Flex wanted to continue to keep up the style. Flex Wheeler would return to the stage at the 2017 Olympia, but this time in the classic physique category. Yes, the year the guy you see in the back, Chris Bamstead, made his classic debut. Well, this was a new category designed for not so big but very aesthetic physiques. And this is where Flex shocks the world by showing up at 52 years old like this. Clearly, it was very difficult to remember those glorious times in the 90s. However, it seemed impossible that a man who, having gone through so many surgeries and so many procedures, would now get ready again. And it's even more surprising when Flex tells us that he based all his leg training on doing quad extensions and very little on an isolated machine because of all the problems his physique was carrying. Be that as it may, Flex Wheeler starred in one of the most unimaginable combats in bodybuilding history 17 years later. Barimania.
Well, he got his name Flex. He's very flexible and he's still got it. He's come a long way from those.
I just want to be a beacon of light for people who've been through struggles, kidney transplant, the disease that caused me to have to retire, I still have, so I have to fight that every day. The medication, I was in the hospital for a little over 2 years, 9 surgeries in 11 weeks, so...
And just 2 years after this iconic image, Flex began to experience severe symptoms in his right leg. He was in extreme pain, he was beginning to lose feeling, and because of poor circulation, his leg began to suffer changes in color and temperature. The doctors diagnosed severe arterial compromise. This meant that his main arteries were blocked, preventing blood flow to his leg. Flex Wheeler had faced years of health problems. Not only his kidney transplant in 2003, but also vascular complications such as blood clots, probably exacerbated by his lifestyle as a competitive bodybuilder. And this is when doctors predicted the worst for Flex. If he continued with these circulation problems, all of his extremities could be affected. But he was also in so much pain that it made life impossible for him. Imagine for a moment what that pain must have been like when he acknowledged that he saw surgery not as a problem but as a salvation. He knew that the amputation of his leg was a step toward beginning to regain some quality of life. So the man who had had one of the biggest and most muscular legs in bodybuilding would now paradoxically have to return to his old life.
This is the first surgery where, they'll take something in my leg and change my life forever. And honestly, I don't know what that's gonna feel like. I'm pretty mentally prepared for everything right now. But I think the biggest challenge for me is going to be when I wake up and notice that my leg is gone. Yeah, I don't know what to expect, but I'm getting nervous. I'm not worried because God's in control. And I'm just a human being, so I am nervous of the unknown.
Hey, brother, how you doing? You all right? No? I ain't never seen you look healthier. I'm only gonna give you a couple of weeks to recover. You know me, you still at that date in the backyard, right?
He said, yeah.
Alright, man, I love you. I'm glad you're doing okay. Somebody shave you.
He's stupid. He looks good with a beard.
Alright, so finally leaving the hospital, on my way over to the rehabilitation center. I'll be there for anywhere from 3 weeks to a couple of months, so the journey continues. I really got to be honest and say my entire life I've never been comfortable in my own skin. On stage, all my preparations, never liked how I looked. I always wanted more. Always was pissed off, but here I sit as an amputee and finally I'm just comfortable. My life is great. I'm truly blessed. I'm still here amongst the living out of all the incredible bouts and surgeries I've had, which has been more than the average bear for one person, man. I'm still here. I'm still breathing, and that's a beautiful thing, man. It's a beautiful thing. I'm truly blessed. I'm truly blessed.
And so paradoxical is that the man who had the most aesthetic physique in history was never comfortable with his physique. He himself always said he wanted more, and bodybuilding adds you in this race of always wanting more and never being enough. How much is enough? Well, many times it is health that ends up setting the limits. The question here is whether all that has really been worth it. Well, in the words of Flex Wheeler, you've heard how it wasn't until now that he finally started to feel at peace. He began to feel at peace when he realized that he was not his scars. He was not the physique he once had. His peace lay far beyond all that, but after a life of pain and suffering, bodybuilding wanted to give him the recognition that the Sultan of Symmetry seemed to deserve. Tune Papinan Bay.
No one could have been. Who could have been Flex that day? No one.
That was the most perfect physique I'd ever seen up close in my life.
Champion is Flex Wheeler.
Flex Wheeler and Arnold Schwarzenegger hands him the
trophy. I know what it takes to get big, and this guy was big. And I've always wondered to myself, how can a bodybuilder look like that?
Couldn't believe the shape. The physique on that guy was unreal.
You knew he was dead serious, and he also had that killer look in his eye.
He kept to himself. He was respectful, but on the stage, he would battle. He would throw elbows. He would stand his ground.
And dramatic as it gets.
I would look at pictures of Flex Wheeler and I'd say, you know what? I know he's out there. I know he's coming. And it made me train harder.
He put everything he had into his preparations for the show, and it paid off.
Ken Wheeler was a guy who got beat up on, and people would piss on him and stuff like that. So I created this alter ego, this Flex Wheeler character who, didn't take shit from people and, didn't start stuff, but was quick to end it or quick to get into it. I just appreciate that everybody giving me an opportunity to find out who I really am. To change instead of just writing me off.
Ladies and gentlemen, Flex Wheeler, Arnold Schwarzenegger. But I told you many times, you won 4 Arnold Classics, and they always considered you one of the greatest champions of all time. They had the symmetry, the size, and the most fantastic posing routine. You've done an extraordinary job, and that's why you get this Lifetime Achievement Award for all the great things that you've done for bodybuilding. Thank you very much for your great service. Thank you, Flex.
I never won the Olympia, but I have the honor of this man here calling me one of the greatest of all times, and that's better than anything, to have the recognition. I don't want any of you guys to feel sorry for me for anything that I've done or went through or going through or will go through, because without every one of those steps, I would not be here standing on stage with you. It's made me the man that I am. Everything that I've done wrong, everything that I've done right, all of it led me to the man that I am, and I'm thankful for all of it. So I take pleasure in my weaknesses, in my insults, in my hardship. I suffer for the Lord. For I am weak, He's strong. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you guys. God bless all of you.